What is up, everybody? Welcome back to From the Holler. If you're new, my name is Missy, and I have been thinking about starting this little series for quite a while now, and I'm just going to jump in and we're going to see how it goes. And if nothing else, I will leave these on my YouTube channel so that hopefully in the very distant future, if my kids want to come and watch these videos, or my grandkids want to come and watch these videos, then they can see, they can get a glimpse inside of, Nanny's childhood and growing up and, coming from the holler and the things that went on and all the things, and know what made Mama or Nanny into Mama or Nanny. So I've got my big old cup of cold drink, my Arnold Palmer, and we're just going to jump right into this. So let's go. So I guess we need to start from the very beginning here. And then we'll kind of branch off of that as the series progresses, and we'll just go from there. Okay. So in 1965, my oldest brother, who was 16, almost 17 at the time, yes, my parents had two sets of children. My oldest brother was 22 years older than I am, and it goes on down. The one closest to me is 8 years older than I am, and then I'm the baby, but we'll get to that. But in 1965, my 16, almost 17-year-old brother, he bought a motorcycle, and he had been working and saving money and all that, and Mom and Dad took him to pick this motorcycle up. They were about a mile and a half away from home, and a drunk driver hit him on his motorcycle and killed him pretty much instantly. And Mom and Dad were behind him. They saw everything. And from what I have been told, without going into too much detail, gory detail anyway, from what I have been told, there was not a bone in his body that had not been broken from being hit. Now, of course, I wasn't around at this time, okay? I didn't come into the picture for several years later. My sister that is next to me, she was 3, and she has a few memories of the things that happened in the immediate moments following, or the days following. And I mean, I can't imagine what my parents went through. Like, I just can't, seeing that happen to your child, and, being the first one on the scene and all the things. And I can't imagine. From what I was told, my mother had a nervous breakdown, and that was the day that she pretty much, how do I put this? She pretty much went into shutdown mode, and some people say she never came out of it from that day until the day that she died in 1991. So I don't know. People say that it was just not the same. She was not the same. So there's that. So let's fast forward to 1970, and I came along, and Mom was working outside of the home. Of course, Dad was working. And I think, I'm not sure, but I think that may have been when he had his own construction company. He and my brothers used to be in construction. They actually built the house that we live in right now. I can say, I'm not going to say it. I'm not. I'm going to be nice. But yeah, they and some other family members of mine, a couple of uncles and cousins, built the house that we are living in right now. And so Mom was back to work. I was born, and I was with my brothers and my sister and my mom and my dad for a little while. But when Mom went back to work, my grandmother and my aunt, my Nanny, they offered. I mean, they took care of me. You know, they babysat and were there and all that. And from what I was told, now my mother would never answer questions. Okay, never answer questions, even though, and you'll see why I had a bunch of questions, but she would never answer them. And from what I have been told, one day they just stopped coming to pick me up from my grandmother's. Like, they dropped me off and went to work and just didn't come back to get me. So, grandmother and my Nanny took me in, and they were so afraid that Mom and Dad would come and pick me up that they never spoke about it. They never questioned why. They never said, hey, you remember you've got a kid here? They never did anything. They were so scared that they would come and get me, and that they would lose me. And so they just kind of let it go and let it be. And they raised me. I had 2 aunts and an uncle that were still at home with grandmother, taking care of her. And my Nanny, she never got married. She never had a boyfriend. Back then they were considered old maids. My Aunt Sue got married to a widower who was like 2 houses up. Very late in life. My uncle, he married very late in life. And it was kind of a shock when they both got married. They both got married kind of close together. But, they moved out. So it was just me, Nanny, and grandmother. And, I had no clue. I thought that was normal. I had friends in school and stuff. And, they lived with Mom or Mom and Dad or whatever. A couple of my friends had lost their dads, and it was just their mom and them and their siblings. But I never questioned. For a long time I didn't question why things were the way they were. I was just a happy-go-lucky kid. I didn't have a care in the world, and my life was good. My Aunt Sue owned a dress shop locally here, just down in the little town, and I use that term loosely. But she owned a dress shop, and she made all my clothes, and they were all beautiful. I was raised up in church. We were at church every time the doors were open. We went to every revival that came around close by. Even if it wasn't at our church, we went to revival, especially if it was one of grandmother's favorite preachers. My Nanny and my other Aunt Sue and my uncle had a singing group, and it was the trio, and they would go to all these different churches and things like that and sing. They were invited everywhere. We traveled out of state, we traveled local. I mean, we just went everywhere. So I was in church a lot. And our church opened up a Christian school, and that's where I went for the first 2 years, and then they shut down, and then I went to a public school for my third grade, and it was kind of like, what? What? And then they opened back up, I think, my fifth grade year. Yeah, I think it was my fifth grade year. They opened back up, and so I went back to the Christian school and was there for 3 years. And of course, you had to pay tuition, and Mom and Dad were asked to help pay tuition, and of course they didn't have it. I mean, y'all just have to understand that we were dirt poor, just completely dirt poor. And a gentleman from our church offered to pay my tuition. He sponsored me so that I could go to this Christian school. And I'm so thankful for him. He has since passed on, but he was a good man. And I am so thankful for him. But anyway, I was probably 10, 11 years old, something like that. And I started questioning some things. And I got to go spend some time with Mom and Dad. They reluctantly said okay. And I didn't know that at the time, I had no clue that they really didn't want me there, but, they okay. And yeah, when I went back, I had long, like down past my booty, long blonde hair. I had never had a haircut. And when I went back to grandmother's, my hair was greased to my head and had tats all in it. It was just all matted up because, nobody brushed it. And, hey, I was having a good time. There was a lot more freedoms at Mom and Dad's than what there was at grandmother's, and a whole new world had opened up to me that weekend. And, Mom and Dad had TV. Grandmother would not allow a TV in her house. Not at all. We listened to the radio. She listened to her favorite preachers every day. We listened to gospel singing. There were no TVs in our house. And at Mom and Dad's, there were TVs. And I was introduced to Hee Haw and, oh Lord, I'm going to age myself big time here, Lawrence Welk, and my favorite show of all, Solid Gold. If y'all don't remember Solid Gold, they had the Solid Gold dancers, and that was what I wanted to do when I grew up, and I just knew I was going to make it. I was going to be a Solid Gold dancer. Yes. Now, when my brother got killed, my parents lived in their house down in the Holler, right down the hill from where I'm at now. My grandmother lived, and the little house is still there. The little log cabin that I grew up in is still there, right across the road from where I'm at now. And when my brother died, my mother could not handle living in that house anymore. So they found a little rental house on down in the area. And I remember it well. The rent was $25 a month. And I remember it well. It was a 4-room house. It had no running water, no bathroom. There was an outhouse. You had the living room, kitchen, 1 bedroom, and then another bedroom. And there was a big walk-in closet between the bedrooms. There were no closets in the bedrooms. You just had that big one there. And I remember that house well, very well. But we moved, or they moved, a couple of times from there to another place and then back there. I mean, it was, back and forth. And then one day, apparently they got behind on the rent or something, or they got into it with the landlady. I don't know. You just had to know my dad to understand why I questioned how things went down. He was a very, very outspoken man, and I get a lot of my mouthiness from him. So, just they decided to move back into the house that they had been living in when my brother was killed. And there was a lot of work to do to it, which still, in today's in today's ways, that house would have been condemned 50 times over. It was just an old log cabin and it was set up on rocks. There were piles of rocks underneath the house holding it up off the ground. And again, it was a 4-room house. Again, no running water, no bathroom, no nothing. And it stayed that way. It stayed that way. We never had running water in that house. And there was an outhouse, and it was given to my dad. The land and all that was given to my dad by my grandmother, because my grandparents owned this huge farm. And where I'm sitting now, our house is on 2 acres of part of that farm, that original farm. And they owned everything around me and down the holler. They pretty much owned the whole holler. And that's why it's called what it is. But Mom and Dad decided to move back, and there was a lot of work to be done. And there was an old cedar chest, or was it a cedar chest or a locker? I don't remember, but it was an old trunk, maybe. And I found it, and I opened it, and it had my brother's FFA, Future Farmers of America. It had that jacket in there, and he was a huge member in FFA. And it had a couple of other things of his, and there were newspaper clippings in there with his obituary and about the trial and stuff of the drunk driver that hit him, and just different things, And when my mother walked in and saw what I was looking at, she told me to get out, and for me to go home. That stung. But she told me to go home and not come back. And I was probably, I don't know, 13, between 12 and 13. And so I ran up the hill, which is a feat in itself. If you were to see the hill, it's straight up, and it was a dirt road at the time. I ran up the hill towards grandmother's, just crying my eyes out. And when I got there, of course, grandmother and Nanny wanted to know what was wrong, what's going on. And I told them what had happened. And they told me that I just need to understand, that she didn't mean it, and just overlook it. Okay. So I did. But that was really hard for a little girl to hear. A little girl desperately searching for a relationship with her mother. That was hard. Now, at about this time, Mom had to have surgery. And I don't even remember who took me to the hospital. But I just remember being taken to the hospital. And we were all standing outside. They had called us to all meet with the doctor. And we were standing outside of the operating room doors. And the doctor came out and he said, well, she's okay. She came through it fine. We got all the cancer. Wait, what? What do you mean? And what do you mean cancer? I had no clue. I had not been told anything. What do you mean cancer? And I'm just standing there looking at him like, what cancer? And he continued, we think we got it all. She's going to have to do radiation. She's going to have to do this and that and blah, blah, blah. But we think we've got her fixed. My mind is still blown because as far as I knew, my mother was not in the hospital to have surgery for cancer. I had no clue. None. I hadn't been told anything. And that was the first time I'm hearing of this. Now, this was just the first of Mom's cancer. Well, actually, no, it wasn't. When Mom was pregnant with me, they found a tumor. And I was in there with the tumor. And after she had me, she had to have a hysterectomy not long after she had me, because it was cancer. And yeah, they didn't think that I would make it because of where the cancer was and how big the tumor was. They had to watch really, really closely. And so, but I wasn't told about any of that until much later on in life. So, to me, this is the first, when Mom had her first surgery, at 12 years, for me to be 12 years old, and I'm hearing cancer, I'm thinking, this is the first I've known of this. And I'm just looking at my brothers and my sister, and I'm like, why didn't you tell me? Why? And nobody wanted to answer that, except for one brother, and he stepped up and he said, we were trying to protect you. And I said, so protecting me by lying to me? I mean, I'm a preteen, I don't know.